In Naruto, it seems that one of the most common words that we hear is forbidden jutsu, also known as kinjutsu. These forbidden jutsus, though they're supposed to be forbidden, seem to be everywhere. In fact, in the show, we know of over 30 forbidden jutsu. So if these forbidden jutsu are so forbidden, what makes them forbidden? And more importantly, what amongst them is the strongest? See, we've already identified that there's a myriad of different forbidden techniques, but today we're going to be exploring what the top 15 strongest forbidden jutsu are. Before we get into ranking anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And while you guys are click-clacking away, go ahead and follow my other YouTube page, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto, I talk about anime like Bleach and One Piece and Avatar: The Last Airbender, Fire Force, Mob Psycho 100. Before we get into all that, guys, today I want to talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Into the AM. Into the AM is an online clothing store with a bunch of really awesome clothes. You see, Into the AM covers a wide range of styles. They have awesome basics like this black hoodie and these black joggers, but they also have incredible and beautiful graphic tees. And not only do their clothes cover a wide range of styles, let me tell you, they are incredibly comfortable and well priced. See, right now, Into the AM is actually running 2 separate bundle deals. The first of which is 3 graphic tees for $60. And let me tell you, that is a steal for graphic tees as gorgeous as this. But they're also running a 3 basic tees for $49.95 bundle deal, which would be a design like this with a little Into the AM logo. But if those deals aren't good enough for you, you can also use the code NCHammer23 at checkout or use the link in my pinned comment and description for 10% off your order. So what are you guys waiting for? Pop on over to Into the AM to pick you up some of this gorgeous merch today. So, forbidden jutsus, one of the more confusing terms in Naruto. I mean, what makes these jutsus forbidden? And why, when people use these forbidden jutsus, are they not really punished at all? You see, we've done a video explaining every single forbidden jutsu in the entirety of Naruto. However, today I want to focus on the strength of these individual forbidden jutsus and find out for sure which is the strongest. But before we get to chatting about which is the strongest, I do briefly want to cover what makes a forbidden jutsu a forbidden jutsu. And for that, we have to talk about the 6 ways that a jutsu becomes forbidden. The first way that a jutsu becomes forbidden is if it endangers the user, like Twin Snake's mutual death technique, the reverse lotus, or Reaper death seal. The second way that a jutsu becomes forbidden is if it requires an insane amount of chakra to use, like the multi-shadow clone jutsu. The third way that a jutsu becomes forbidden is if it violates the laws of nature. This is why Edo Tensei is a forbidden jutsu, because it brings the dead back to life. The fourth way that a jutsu becomes forbidden is if it requires one's own life or a sacrifice to use. I've already lied once in this video. Reaper Death Seal was not a forbidden jutsu for the first reason, it's a forbidden jutsu for the fourth reason. Because of this, things like one's own life jutsu, Edo Tensei, and Reaper Death Seal are all forbidden jutsu. The fifth reason is specific to the Uchihas. The Uchihas stated that if a jutsu requires the destruction or the blinding of a Sharingan, that it is a forbidden jutsu. This is why Izanami and Izanagi are forbidden jutsus. And lastly, the last reason that a jutsu becomes a forbidden jutsu is if it creates a massive amount of destruction upon use. This is why techniques like the filler technique Fury are not allowed. The thing is, it doesn't really even matter if you use a forbidden jutsu. Tobirama created 3 of them, Tsunade and Sakura constantly use one of them, Naruto uses 2 of them, Sasuke used one of them almost for the entire duration of the show, and all of them are now in positions of power and basically never had to apologize or see any kind of consequences for using these forbidden jutsus. So forbidden is just kind of a word that they decide to slap in front of jutsu to make everybody feel better, like it's locked away, when in reality it's a couple of hand signs away at any given moment. Now that we have a basic understanding of forbidden jutsus and what makes them forbidden and what happens if we use them, let's get cracking on this list. Mind you, today we're talking about the top 15 strongest kinjutsu, so a lot of forbidden jutsu will not make this list. Genuinely, when you think about it, we've actually probably seen an equal amount of forbidden jutsu as regular jutsu used throughout the duration. That's not true. That's not true at all. I should delete that clip, but I'm not going to. I want you to understand how dumb I am sometimes. All right, moving on from that, let's get to number 15 on this list. Deidara's forbidden jutsu, also known as the Hidden Stone's forbidden jutsu. Technically, this forbidden jutsu doesn't have a name. It's just referred to as the Hidden Stone's kinjutsu. And while a lot of people might think that this forbidden jutsu is insanely powerful because it's what powered up Deidara, I mean, it is, and also it isn't. See, Deidara's power is basically split into 2 relatively equal halves. He has his ability to knead his chakra into materials, he uses clay, and his explosion release Kekkei Genkai. However, if you take away the explosion release Kekkei Genkai, this ability gets a lot weaker. Essentially, the way that this kinjutsu works, I'm not even necessarily sure why it's a kinjutsu. Like maybe because you can feed materials to your chest hole and it creates a massive explosion and it kills you, or maybe because it goes against the laws of nature. This kinjutsu essentially allows the user to knead their chakra into materials. And upon kneading chakra into these materials, those materials can then be formed into something with a shape and controlled. We saw Deidara do this with spiders and dragons and kind of bipedal monsters. And while on premise that's really cool because you could make an army of rock goblins or clay spiders or even a clay dragon to fly around on, think about Deidara's ability if at the end they didn't explode. It would still be cool and relatively powerful, but it would also kind of just be a clay army. Even things like Deidara's C4 that creates nano-sized particles that can be inhaled and then exploded from the inside would kind of just be nano-sized clay particles running through your blood, which is probably not good for your artery system, but it's not gonna kill you immediately. Also, technically, those who train in Ryuchi Cave also have the ability to feed their chakra into the surroundings and animate it. And this doesn't require feeding materials to a hand mouth, chewing it up and giving it form. Snake sages who trained in Ryuchi Cave can quite literally just feed chakra into the ground and create massive rock golems. So this is unfortunately the inferior version of controlling your surroundings with your chakra. And for that, it gets the 15th spot. That being said though, if you thought this kinjutsu was tedious to pull off, the next is a lot more tedious, because the next technique is called Jar of Poison. This technique was used by Shino Aburame, Danzo's right-hand man, who was one of the most talented Aburame in Aburame clan history. I'm sorry, it was used by Terune Aburame. I'm all over the map today. Terune pulled off this kinjutsu by collecting corpses he killed with his Rinkaichu. The Rinkaichu being a bug that only the most talented Aburames are able to use. It's a nano-sized venomous insect that covers the skin of the Aburame user who's able to use them. And as their skin becomes covered in this Rinkaichu, anybody who comes into contact with said skin will have, wherever they touched this user of the Rinkaichu's cells, begin to destroy themselves. Essentially, any contact with this Aburame clan member will have your body start to decay. But it's not just the places that came into contact with the Aburame as the bugs begin to spread, looking for more living cells. If hypothetically Terune is able to kill enough people with this technique, he can gather all of their corpses. And after gathering all of these corpses, he puts them in a mound together. Terune then places a seal over this mountain of corpses, and as the corpses decay, they release gas. This gas builds up under the seal and all of the Rinkaichu multiply as they breed on these mountain of corpses. Once enough gas has been created, Terune lights the gas and explodes the mountain of corpses, which releases a horde of Rinkaichu, who effectively operate as a poisonous cloud. Anybody who comes into contact with this poisonous cloud has the effects of the Rinkaichu affected to them without ever touching an Aburame. So essentially, the second this cloud hits you, it's GG's. Only problem is, it does take like 1,000 corpses. Not kidding. The one time we saw Terune pull it off, it was quite literally like a mass grave. And then after the poisonous cloud is made, it's not like if your allies touch it, they'll be all right. Anybody who touches the poisonous cloud is gone. So yeah, it's forbidden. You can't even sacrifice one person for a jutsu, let alone a small army. And even though this technique is incredibly powerful, the fact that you quite literally need to kill about 1,000 people, build a barrier, wait for the gas to build up, then ignite that gas to direct a poisonous cloud at people, it's a lot of work. So yeah, Jar of Poison, number 14. And while you might be comfortable with that selection, you're most likely not going to be comfortable with this one, because coming up next at number 13, we have the multi-shadow clone jutsu.
Nick, how could you put the multi-shadow clone jutsu so low? Naruto uses it to basically beat the entire world.
I'm sorry, I know you don't sound like that. But here's the thing. When we consider the strength of a jutsu, specifically a kinjutsu, we can't really use Naruto as the watermark. Yeah, of course multi-shadow clone jutsu is powerful in Naruto's hands. He has like infinite chakra. And infinity divided by 100 is still infinity, which means that every single shadow clone that Naruto makes is still capable of creating a Rasengan or a Rasenshuriken or basically anything Naruto needs them to do. But your average or even above average human being's chakra, when split into even more than 10 bodies, is basically gonna be irrelevant. There's a reason people like Tobirama and Sasuke never use more than 3 shadow clones. Because let's not forget that shadow clone jutsu also depletes your own chakra, which means that if hypothetically you created 99 shadow shadow clones, you would have 1% of your original chakra, which is why multi-shadow clone jutsu is forbidden, because it uses so much of your chakra, it puts your life in danger, but also for basically everybody outside of Naruto or any Jinchuriki who's able to tap into the power of their tailed beast, having even less than 10% of your chakra in both yourself and your shadow clones makes basically everybody fodder. So while yes, it's cool when Naruto uses it, because even when he has 100 shadow clones made, each of those 100 shadow clones probably has more chakra than your average Jonin. Everybody outside of the Energizer Bunny that is Naruto, it's just not worth it. So yeah, it's going at 13. I feel significantly more confident about number 12, because coming in at number 12, we have Living Corpse Reanimation, also known as Orochimaru taking over a little boy jutsu. Once again, I can hear a couple of you saying,
But Nick, this jutsu quite literally allows Orochimaru to live forever.
It doesn't though. So for those of you who aren't keyed in, Living Corpse Reanimation jutsu was when Orochimaru is able to swap his consciousness into another body, effectively giving him immortality. The reason this gives Orochimaru immortality is because if his body was starting to age or decay, he can switch into a younger body to have a younger, stronger body, and can keep doing this for years and years and years, effectively giving him immortality. Except there's a couple of problems. One, Orochimaru can only use this technique every 3 years, which is a very long cooldown. However, that's kind of convenient considering the fact that after 3 years, the body that Orochimaru has taken over begins to reject him. Essentially, the consciousness he took over, whether or not they gave up their body willingly or not, begins to fight back against Orochimaru and push him out. Which means that basically every single 3 years, Orochimaru needs to find a new body to swap into. Which is fine if you have a laboratory filled with young abducted children like Orochimaru has, but to your average person, where are you gonna find these people? And then of course you have to take into consideration that every time Orochimaru tries to use Living Corpse Reanimation, it's a mental battle against the person he's trying to take over. And should hypothetically the person he's taking over have, oh, I don't know, the ability of the Sharingan, they can flip this back onto Orochimaru. Being able to place Orochimaru in a Genjutsu and actually possibly being able to take over Orochimaru's body if they want it. So every 3 years, Orochimaru has to play mental tug-of-war to take over a little boy's body. Now obviously this is different if Orochimaru finds a perfect host, like he thought Sasuke and Kimimaru and Itachi were. Bodies that after taking over, Orochimaru would be able to inhabit for more than 3 years. Bodies that hopefully Orochimaru would be able to inhabit for the entirety of their natural life. And this is kind of what we're seeing in Boruto, because Orochimaru took over a white Zetsu body in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. And white Zetsus don't have consciousness and also technically have immortal bodies because they're created out of Hashirama cells. So by using Living Corpse Reanimation on a white Zetsu, Orochimaru has effectively made himself immortal and also technically given himself wood release, but he hasn't used that yet. Because that's the other thing about Living Corpse Reanimation, any body Orochimaru takes over, he also gets the ability of said body. But how many people get the opportunity to pin down a white Zetsu and transfer their consciousness into it? Obviously, yes, this jutsu works well for Orochimaru considering his circumstances, but there's better, less work-intensive ways to stay immortal in the Naruto universe. Specifically, the next entry on our list, Earth Grudge Fear. Coming in at number 11, this is Kakuzu's Kinjutsu. This was a forbidden jutsu held by the Hidden Waterfall, and upon being expelled from the village for not killing Hashirama, Kakuzu stole this Kinjutsu. This Kinjutsu effectively alters the anatomy of the person who's using it, and instead of flesh and blood, the user basically becomes a ragdoll, with their body now being created out of black tendrils. But this ability gives you much more than just looking like a Raggedy Ann. This ability not only basically confers the user immortality, because the user can punch their black tendrils into somebody's body, rip out their organs, and replace their current existing organs with these new fresh organs, which in layman terms is basically like, imagine I have Earth Grudge Fear. If my liver's starting to fail, I can simply take somebody else's healthy liver and replace it with mine, giving me a new healthy organ. Kakuzu is able to do this with every single organ in his body, which effectively granted him immortality. Because without organ failure or somebody blowing your head off, you're basically not gonna die. So now do you not only not have a 3-year timeline, you also don't have to play mental tug-of-war with somebody who might have a Sharingan. On top of this, just like with Living Corpse Reanimation, Kakuzu, if he steals somebody's heart, is able to use their abilities. That's why every single mask that Kakuzu had that represented each of his own individual hearts had their own chakra releases. That's because the shinobi whose hearts he stole were able to use those releases. And because of this, Kakuzu was able to use all 5 nature chakra releases. On top of this, a body being made of black threads basically made Kakuzu Kakuzu invulnerable to damage, to a small degree that is. Kakuzu is able to reattach severed limbs on both himself and others. He's able to detach his own limbs and control them from a distance. And because his Kinjutsu basically conferred the same level of immortality as living corpse reanimation and crazy offensive, defensive, and healing techniques, yeah, it's stronger than Orochimaru's. But since we're talking about Orochimaru, we should talk about one of the better things he ever created, the Cursed Seal. Talking about the Cursed Seal is better, probably isn't my best use of terminology. Coming in at number 10, we're gonna be talking about the Cursed Seal of Heaven and the Cursed Seal of Earth because they're the exact same thing. We've seen this Cursed Seal used on the Sound Village 4, Sasuke, Anko, and the reason that it's considered forbidden because 9 out of the 10 people who have a Cursed Seal planted on them die, as well as those who use the Cursed Seal also run a risk of their own life. Because the way that the Cursed Seal was created is that essentially Orochimaru extracted Jugo's Kekkei Genkai and formed it into said Cursed Seal. This Cursed Seal, when activated, effectively makes whoever is using the Cursed Seal a sage to a small degree, as the Cursed Seal gives the user access to pulling in Senjutsu chakra. However, the Senjutsu chakra they're pulling in is technically being pulled in by Orochimaru, because in every single Cursed Seal, Orochimaru has placed a little bit of his DNA and his chakra intermixed with Jugo's Kekkei Genkai. And since Orochimaru himself is a relatively talented sage who was able to pull in nature chakra and mix it into Senjutsu, but wasn't strong enough to undergo a Snake Sage transformation, the power up the user of a Cursed Seal gets is pretty insane. It's similar to getting a Sage mode. All those who activate their Cursed Seals get increased stamina, speed, strength. Sometimes they get new abilities if they use their second form, because Cursed Seals, when they come from Orochimaru, come with 2 forms. The first of which is just an increase to your standard abilities, while the second is an entirely new form. The best example of this is Sasuke in his winged form, where he's able to fly. The power of this Cursed Seal was so significant that it allowed Sasuke to fight head-to-head against Naruto in a Jin cloak in the early days of Naruto. It also allowed Kimimaro to all but defeat a drunken Rock Lee and Gaara single-handedly. However, on top of all of this jutsu is also incredibly strong for the person who places the Cursed Seal, because the more that the Cursed Seal is used, the more susceptible the person using the Cursed Seal is to agreeing with the ideologies of the person who placed said Cursed Seal. Essentially, as you use the Cursed Seal, you become indoctrinated to the person who put it on you. And on top of all of that, Orochimaru is able to use these Cursed Seals as little respawn points. As they hold his DNA and chakra, they can be used to bring him back to life. So yeah, for both the user and the planter, the Cursed Seal is incredibly powerful. But since we're talking about incredibly powerful, morally gray techniques, next up at number 9, we have mutually multiplying explosive tags. Now, technically, this answer a cop-out because it's an extension of Edo Tensei, sort of, especially when you consider the fact that I'm not going to be considering things like Daytime Tiger and Evening Elephant because they're just extensions of the 8 Gates technique. But mutually multiplying explosive tags is different enough from Edo Tensei that I believe it deserves its own spot. Also, big Tobirama fan. See, mutually multiplying explosive tags is specific to those who have been Edo Tensei'd. Essentially, it can only be used if you have a body that's been brought back and created with Edo Tensei. Essentially, the way that it works is that you make an Edo Tensei body out of explosive tags, which apparently isn't that difficult when you consider the fact that Edo Tensei bodies are usually made of like a paper-like material that's comprised of the dust and surrounding like grit. I don't know. They never did a chemical breakdown on it. But regardless, by making Edo Tensei body created out of explosive tags, since Edo Tensei bodies have infinite regeneration, as the body begins to regenerate, it creates more explosive tags. However, those explosive tags keep detonating, creating basically an infinite explosion hack. This is the way that Tobirama would use Edo Tensei on the battlefield when he was alive, which would mean he wouldn't have to reanimate incredibly powerful ninja. He could just reanimate anybody, make him out of explosive tags, and send him to the front line. And this is quite honestly similar to what Konan did in her battle against Obito. It is an infinite spree of explosive tag explosions. And unless the Edo Tensei body is sealed or you run really far away really quickly, this is probably gonna kill you. All they really have to do is wrap one arm or a belt around you and explode on you for 5 minutes, and it doesn't matter if you're Madara, you're gonna be meat stew. So is it a cop-out to add this when it's an extension of Edo Tensei? Maybe, but I don't care. It's my video. Up next, after mutually multiplying explosive tags, we have the Rasenshuriken. This one is kind of a confusing spot. Do we talk about the Rasenshuriken? Do we talk about all the things you can add to the Rasenshuriken? Do we consider things like lava release Rasenshuriken that quite literally cut the god tree in half? Or things like tailed beast Rasenshurikens? I don't think I'm gonna consider all the variations of Rasenshuriken, which is why Rasenshuriken is here on the list. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One, even if anybody else on Earth was able to figure out the Rasenshuriken not named Naruto, there there's no way they would be able to add all the things Naruto added to it. 2, a lot of those additions were given to Naruto by the tailed beasts. Things like the lava release, magnet release, and boil release Rasenshurikens were given to him by the tailed beast. In 3, I'm thinking now I might do a video like every Rasenshuriken ranked and explained, where we'll talk about every single Rasenshuriken, which is the weakest, which is the strongest, and everything in the middle. So the Rasenshuriken is a variation of the wind release Rasengan that's been given the shape of a shuriken. And while originally Naruto needed 2 other shadow clones to help him create the shuriken, nowadays he can both create it by himself and control it after it's been thrown, meaning that even after it's left Naruto's hand, he can bend it to avoid obstacles or to make sure that it hits somebody. The Rasenshuriken is one of the heaviest jutsus in the entirety of Naruto because of the density of the chakra required to add a wind chakra element to a Rasengan. This is why the Rasenshuriken has so much power behind its punch. And the reason that the Rasenshuriken is so devastating is because after coming into contact with the target, it explodes into a million little blades. Essentially, tiny microscopic wind scythes explode out of the Rasenshuriken. And there's so many of these tiny little wind scythes that even a highly trained Sharingan can't count them. These little wind blades can pierce every single cell in the body and separate them from the chakra circulatory system, effectively making somebody unable to use chakra. So even if you're not killed by the impact, your inability to use chakra at the very least will take you off the battlefield and at the very most will kill you eventually. However, this is dangerous for Naruto because it can also affect his chakra circulatory system, specifically in his hand. Or should hypothetically he launch one of these Rasenshurikens at a close distance, the blades will hit him, which leaves him vulnerable to having his chakra circulatory system severed from his cells. And because of the danger imposed by using this technique, it is forbidden. While obviously different iterations of the Rasenshuriken like Sage Art, Ultra Big Ball, Tailed Beast Rasenshuriken are some of the strongest things we've ever seen in the show, the Rasenshuriken, just the good old Rasenshuriken, is not. But for argument's sake, if we were to consider all of the things that Naruto could add to the Rasenshuriken, it would probably be about number 2 on this list. Coming up after the Rasenshuriken, we have number 7 and our only non-canon entry onto this list today, Fury. Now, technically, this technique should be a little bit higher, but because it's non-canon, I figured if I put it even close to the top 5, people would get very upset with me. Now, Fury was a technique made by a man by the name of Enno Gyosha, and this technique is essentially a nuclear bomb of natural energy. Essentially, the way this technique works is that in order to use it, somebody has to have a seal on their back. And after somebody has this seal implanted on their back, preferably from the time they're a child, they're able to use a technique called the Forbidden Life Technique Release, the creation of heaven and earth. Essentially, the way this technique works is that the seal on their back opens up and they begin to pull in an insane amount of nature chakra. Once they've pulled in enough nature chakra, all of the nature chakra explodes around them, leaving the user unscathed. And while obviously the user will be tired and will probably have to retire from the battle after doing this, the battle will most likely be over. See, this explosion isn't just some regular old explosion, it's said to be able to level entire villages in one go, and not just smush entire villages like Almighty Push, evaporate them. I mean, think about it. Destroying an entire village-sized area in one attack has only been seen by a handful of people. Nagato, in order to create his Almighty Push to be strong enough to destroy Konoha, took years off his life. The Devapath had to shut down for a little while after using it. The only other thing that we've ever saw that might be able to destroy an entire village in one go was the 10 Tails Tailed Beast Bomb. This is a jutsu of unprecedented power, and it doesn't kill you or shorten your life. It doesn't even use your own chakra, so you're not in danger of depleting your chakra. All you need is to pull in as much nature chakra as possible and then explode it outwards. Obviously, because of the sheer amount of destruction this jutsu caused, though, it was labeled as forbidden. But it took Utakata in his tailed beast form to suppress a fury explosion. That is a tailed beast level attack. And honestly, I would be comfortable putting this at least number 2, but because it's non-canon and people will get upset with me, yes, it's number 7. Heading back to canonicity with number 6, we have the Reaper Death Seal. Now I know what you're saying,
Nick, but the Reaper Death Seal can only kill one person and it kills you.
And while obviously that's true, even though you can use shadow clones to take more people with you, the way that Reaper Death Seal levels the battlefield is insane. Reaper Death Seal is a Fuin jutsu, also known as a sealing jutsu, created by the Uzamakis. And for decades, its existence has been kept a relative secret. So much so that when Orochimaru saw it in part 1 of Naruto, he didn't even know it existed. But that's the power of Reaper Death Seal. Reaper Death Seal allows you to pull out the soul of anybody you're using it on and pull it into the belly of a Shinigami along with your own soul, where you will fight for eternity. And while that just being incredibly metal is enough reason to put it this low on the list, the way that Reaper Death Seals works is also incredibly broken. You see, the Shinigami that's summoned by using Reaper Death Seal is invisible to the person that you're summoning it against. That is, until the Shinigami has got a hold of their soul. And by the time that the Shinigami gets a hold of somebody's soul, it is significantly too late for them. See, upon having the Shinigami grab your soul, you are paralyzed and unable to use chakra, meaning that essentially the second that an invisible death god gets its grip of your soul, you're dead. That is, of course, unless the difference between your chakra levels is so proportionate that you're able to survive. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the person using Reaper Death Seal has to have a relativistic amount of chakra to you, because they can only pull out as much of your soul as they have chakra in comparison to yours. This is why Hiruzen was only able to get Orochimaru's arms and why Minato was only able to get half of Kurama, though Minato did technically have other reasons. But here's the thing, even if you're only able to get half of somebody's chakra, as long as you get their top half, you're pretty much good. Basically, all you need to get is the soul from somebody's torso and head, and because the soul of the torso and head are gone, those organs in that part of the body will no longer work, effectively killing the person you're using it on. Now, obviously, unfortunately, Hiruzen was only able to get Orochimaru's arms. However, even by just getting Orochimaru's arms, Orochimaru basically wasn't able to use Jutsu nearly at the level he was prior until he cut the Shinigami's stomach. So while yes, this technique only works on 1 to however many shadow clones you have currently that are also using this technique amount of people, the fact that you're able to summon an invisible death god that can rip people's souls out of their chests and there's nothing they can do about it puts it this high on the list. After Reaper Death Seal, we have finally cracked our top 5, and coming in at number 5 is the Izanami. See, the Izanami is one of 2 Kenjutsu revolving around the Sharingan, Izanami being the significantly weaker of the 2. See, essentially the way that Izanami works is that if a Sharingan user decides to sacrifice one of their eyes, blinding it permanently, and by the way, this applies to literally any Sharingan, one Tomei all the way up to a Mangekyo Sharingan, they are able to put somebody in an infinite Genjutsu loop. However, there's a couple of caveats for said infinite Genjutsu loop. 1, you have to battle against this person or simply walk them through a couple of events. You then have to mark those events with the power of the Izanami. Once you have a couple of events like a snap, a clap, and me taking a sip of this water bottle, you can build those 3 events into an Izanami time loop. And after you have all of those events in the time loop created, you put the person under Izanami. The other caveat for pulling off Izanami, though, is that the person you're putting it under has to be trying to change the world. Well, not really change the world, just reject reality. Because Izanami was made to counter Izanagi, which is the process of basically rewriting reality to fit your own goals. And because of that, the only way you can get out of Izanami is accepting that you cannot change reality. And if you never come to that conclusion, you stay in Genjutsu forever. Now, the sacrifice of Izanami honestly isn't that crazy. Blinding a Sharingan isn't really the end of the world in a world that has more Sharingans than the current Naruto world. I mean, if a village elder dies, just go take their Sharingan and then bing bang boom, you can do Izanami next week. But because the Uchihas have so much pride around their Sharingan and basically view them as holy objects, they don't want to blind them. And thus, it's labeled as a forbidden jutsu. And while obviously the premise of infinite Genjutsu at the cost of 1 eyeball is tempting, there's a lot of rules around it. I mean, first you have to set somebody up with all the events of an Izanami, and then you have to make sure that they're trying to change reality for their own means. It's a whole thing. You know, it's not a whole thing. I guess it sort of is a whole thing. Number 4, the 8 Gates Formation. The 8 Gates Formation is a technique used by my guy, Rock Lee, Metal Lee, the Suicide Corpse, that essentially relies on using latent power within the body. Essentially, the 8 Gates are a Tenketsu technique that states in your body there is 8 limiters that stop you from using 100% of your chakra. If you open all 8 of these limiters, you will be hundreds of times stronger than you were without opening these limiters. And every single Tenketsu spot you open makes you stronger, but also leaves you more liable to hurting yourself. Because the reason that chakra is limited in the human body is because if the entirety of somebody's chakra is used, punches to other people can shatter your own forearm. And if you open the 8th gate and pump all of your chakra to your heart, you superheat your own blood, which makes you hundreds of times stronger than you even were in the 7th gate, but makes your blood so hot that it quite literally steams out of your body and creates a red aura around you. It also, after a couple of minutes, quite literally burns you from the inside out, making your body ash. If you're willing to make this sacrifice, this is arguably one of the strongest techniques in the Naruto universe. With this ability, people like Might Dai, who was a genin, were able to kill 6 out of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. Mind you, that was the strongest iteration of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist ever, said to be strong enough to topple entire countries, by themselves. On top of that, with the power of the 8th gate, Might Guy was able to fight on par with Madara and almost kill him. And it's still not the strongest thing on this list. It's not even top 3. But you know what is top 3? Our number 3 choice, the second half of the Kinjutsu revolving around the Sharingan, Izanagi. See, Izanagi is the better reason to blind one of your eyes. By blinding one of your eyes, a Sharingan user is able to tap into the ability of the Sage of Six Paths. See, the Sage of Six Paths has an ability called the Creation of All Things Jutsu, where essentially he can make his imagination reality. He does this by projecting his yin chakra with his imagination and giving it form with his yang chakra. Now, obviously, Hagoromo is able to do this whenever he wants. It's how he was able to make the 10-tails chakra into the 9-tailed beasts. But every single user of the Sharingan is not Hagoromo, and therefore, by sacrificing one of their eyes, they do get to use Creation of All Things, but only for about a minute. However, in this minute, reality is in the hands of the Izanagi user. And while usually the way that we see Izanagi used is to erase what would be your own corpse and create a fresh new body somewhere else, a good example of this is Danzo erasing an impaled body from one of Sasuke's Susanoo arrows and giving himself a new body elsewhere. It has been implied, and genuinely we have no reason to believe it shouldn't work this way, that Izanagi can be used for things outside of just giving yourself a new alive body. If you can create a new alive body, hypothetically, what's stopping you from giving yourself an additional Sharingan? What's stopping yourself from giving you 4 arms? What's stopping you from making yourself a couple inches taller? It's even been implied that the Izanagi is able to manipulate things outside of your own body, giving you, for about a minute, the power of Hagoromo himself. But since we're talking about Hagoromo, how could we do it without talking about the Rinnegan? See, the Rinnegan should itself just be a walking forbidden jutsu, but it's actually not. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have its own share of forbidden jutsus. Specifically, and coming in at our number 2 spot, Rinne Rebirth. Rinne Rebirth, also known as the Outer Path Samsara of Heavenly Life technique, is a technique that allows a Rinnegan user to bring back the dead. Specifically, anybody who's died recently. How recently? We don't really know. All we know is that upon using this technique, the King of Hell emerges from the ground and spits out the souls of the newly deceased. And as these souls go back to their proper bodies, the bodies are rejuvenated and healed. Meaning that if you took a bullet wound to the skull, that bullet wound wouldn't be there anymore. This technique can also be used to make somebody who was brought back using Edo Tensei's body real, like we saw with Madara. Essentially, Rinne Rebirth Jutsu works a lot like One's Own Life Jutsu, which was created by Granny Chia, where in exchange for the Rinnegan user's life, they're able to bring back people. However, unlike Granny Chia's technique, this was able to bring back the entirety of Konoha. And mind you, Konoha is the most populated village in all of Naruto, implying that as long as you die within a certain time limit, Rinne Rebirth should be able to bring you back to life. And it straight up does not matter the amount of people. And what's truly wild is this technique doesn't even necessarily kill the user. It was implied that Nagato actually could have survived using Rinne Rebirth if he had more chakra. The technique itself is just so incredibly chakra depleted that it basically kills anybody who uses it. However, though, if people like Naruto were to hypothetically use it while he was at the height of his chakra power, he probably would survive. Meaning this jutsu has the ability to bring back infinite amount of people within a certain amount of time, and it may not even necessarily cost you your life. So yeah, it's getting the number 2 spot, but it's not getting the number 1 spot. Because, and we all knew this was coming, the number 1 spot is Edo Tensei. How could it not be? Kabuto said it himself that Edo Tensei is probably the strongest jutsu ever created. For the low price of 1 dead body and a little bit of DNA, you can bring back any ninja you want. Oh, and by the way, using the technique and maintaining the technique require no chakra whatsoever. And as long as the person you're bringing back isn't Hashirama, they are basically bent to your will. And even if they are Hashirama, you can just put a seal in their brain that bends them to your will. And you have a choice. You can either directly control exactly what they're doing, or you can just give them a general directive and send them like an undead army at whoever you want. And mind you, these people you just brought back to life are not only invincible, but they have infinitely refilling chakra, meaning that the only way that they will be defeated is by being sealed. However, that's a bit tough when you consider the fact that all of these people are brought back with their abilities. And even if they're not that powerful, you can just turn them into mutually multiplying explosive tags. It's broken. You knew it was broken. It's a disgusting jutsu with basically no weaknesses. Because even if you kill the caster, Edo Tensei remains. Quite literally, the only way for Edo Tensei to be released is to force the caster to release it. Oh, and did I mention you can bring people back to life like for real with Rinne Rebirth? I mean, if you don't think Edo Tensei is the strongest thing on this list, you're kidding yourself. You could hit an Edo Tensei body with Fury, and it would just come back to life. The only hard counters to it are Sealing and Truth Seeker orbs. It's got the #1 spot. But what do you guys think of my list? Do you agree with where I put everything? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now that I'm tapping into all this like ranking content, I feel like I'm a couple months away from doing versus battles.